this was like a decision that was made on purpose to make the Armored Core lock-on Souls-like, and I could clearly see this decision being all about accessibility. A decision that was made on purpose for the wider audience. And to be honest, I hate to say it, but it makes sense. It makes sense because this is the vast, and I mean the vast majority of the player base. This is going to be like 90% of people. Like, we ran a poll on the channel a little bit ago, which had like a few thousand votes, I believe. And like 89% of the people who were like Souls players watching the channel had never played ever an Armored Core game, like not even one or a little bit. If it turns out to be decent, I think like even with my gripes, it's probably going to be a good game. Like, that's the thing. It's just that it might actually be worse than some of the older ones, and all the older ones are like really good too. But I bet you that everyone who plays it is going to love it, because again, that 90%, it's like with Elden Ring, you know? The thing with Elden Ring actually got its fundamentals straight. Like, Elden Ring on a fundamental level is really good gameplay wise. Like, Elden Ring has every hard decision that went into like the Elden Ring like gameplay was a good decision. What Elden Ring got wrong was like the smaller things. So like, you know, not having like buyable consumables, like deciding to scrap like some of the PvP covenant, like invasion reward, some of the stuff related to balance. In a sense, those are small things because they don't really require a lot of like change to the game, or like, yeah, the poise, how it's calculated for different attacks. Like, a lot of these things are like tweaks. Like, you can just change numbers on a spreadsheet and fix everything. So those are not like big issues for a game. Whereas Armored Core 6, on the other hand, I've seen a lot of people say, well, I mean, why complain about it? Like, you can just not use it. Which is like unfortunate, because it's very ignorant to say that, but I don't blame them, because I mean, no one has actually played Armored Core games, so you can't actually fault them for saying that. But the problem with the saying like just don't play with it if you don't like it is that the game is built around that. Like, for instance, you can't fire multiple missiles at multiple targets, or sorry, at a singular target, if you don't use the lock-on. It's like if you were like, say, a Counter-Strike player and you really wanted to get into Call of Duty, but you hated aiming down sight. You hated aiming down sight, and so when you got to play Call of Duty, you refused to aim down sight, because in Counter-Strike you didn't need to. And you know what I mean? Like, you can't just forego a mechanic, even if you can, and even if the game like has some systems built around it. You know, like there's an hipfire perk in Call of Duty. Does that mean you should only hipfire in Call of Duty? No, you're going to get wrecked if you do that, because the game is not built around hipfiring. I think it's the same thing with Armored Core. Like, the game is built around the lock-on, so you have to accept to use the lock-on. It just goes without saying. So you can't say like just don't use the lock-on, because the game is going to be built around that. It's just something that I feel, you know, because these people have never played an Armored Core games, when they watch like these trailers, they might not grasp like all the information. But you're not going to be able to like play the game to its fullest extent if you don't use this hard lock-on feature. Hence, the missile example is one of them. I'm sure there's going to be many others. I mean, just gameplay-wise, it's going to be way harder. And that was kind of the point of like the skill being reduced. It's way harder to have to manually aim, and it's much more rewarding gameplay-wise because it takes skills to do it. It rewards good skills, and it's not like it's the hardest thing in the world. Like, you know, shooter games exist, everyone can aim, and Armored Core is not a shooter game. It's very generous with the reticle. Like, in a shooter, the reticle is a small circle in the center of your screen. In Armored Core, it's a huge circle or a huge box, sometimes even the entire screen. But even when it's the entire screen, you still have to aim the screen as if it was a huge box. So in all Armored Core games, you still have to aim. It's just that the quote-unquote reticle is much bigger to account for the three-dimensional movement. And it always made sense. That's what kind of like separated Armored Core from like other like shooting type game, not necessarily shooters, but other games where you had to shoot. Now that it has a hard lock-on, it's much more of like an action adventure type of game. than a mech game, like gameplay wise, at least from what we saw so far. All right, let's actually kill that boss. Of course, Schmidt, like, I'm not saying I hold the truth here and that only my opinion matters. I'm just saying the vast majority of people have never played an Armored Core game. Therefore, you have to be careful with like, you know, opinions that stem from nothing, really. Kind of want to just do that. Oh my god, we got the blade too. There you go. Yeah, it's more camera control than aiming, but there's still some aiming. Like, Robert, if you like, if you watch some like, sorry about the noise. If you watch some high skill ceiling like Armored Core, like when you're in the heat of the battle, like aiming becomes more and more important because everything moves so quickly. Then it's not just camera control. You actually have to aim the reticle box like on target, and it's very easy to miss. And on top of that, the game was built in the past around your like the easier your ability or the better you are at aiming, the smaller you could afford your box to be. So it's like you could compensate for your lack of aiming skills, for instance, by getting a bigger aim box, but you would lose in range or lock-on speed within that box. So that was the trade-off. Like if you wanted to have an easier time aiming, you would lose on these traits. Now I don't know how the internal chip part, like I just described, is going to play out in this next Armored Core, because if there's no more lock-on box, like that trade-off that existed is no longer there. It's going to be something else. It must have something to do with the hard lock-on. I just cannot imagine. I cannot imagine it any other way. But what is it going to be? Well, just have to wait and see. Can we get some chill music? Yeah, I forgot the music. Good point. The unfortunate thing though is ooh, this is loud. The sad music, here you go. The unfortunate thing is that any criticism that you do, no matter what, like any criticism is always received very negatively, when it's usually a good thing. I think it's very healthy to have these discussions, and it's not necessarily like shitting on the game or the work of the dev. I think it's just something important that needs to be said, really. Like as far as the Armored Core is concerned, and that doesn't make me think that the game is bad. It's just that it's something to consider, that I feel like because content creators actually get a much more positive reception out of being overly positive and being very hype, because of all of that, they don't really, not a lot of them like dare to go against the grain and say like what they really think, or you know, go beyond like the copium. And I try to stay true to what I really think in that regard, and that's probably why I kind of stand out as a sore thumb and that a lot of people don't like my content. But at the end of the day, you know, it's, you know, you can consume whatever you want, you can like whatever you want, and it's all fine. We're just having like a discussion, and we're trying to bring out different ideas that people that don't necessarily have the same experience might not have thought of. So yeah. People see criticism as a personal attack. Yeah, well, to be fair to their point, like people who see it as a personal attack, it's there's a little bit to it, because for instance, if you really like that lock-on mechanic, for instance, you're going to dislike that someone is vouching not to have it. It's like when we see people that complain about hard swap, you know, we know that hard swap is a great mechanic for Souls games. So when we see someone complaining about hard swap, it is technically criticism, but it will hurt. Like this is like dangerous for us, for instance. So I get why some people are like kind of avert to it, because if they really like it, good on them. The problem with that is a lot of these people, 90% of them, lack even the experience to have a proper judgment on this. There's only like that 10% which has played Armored Core, but not even then. Like, even within that 10%, a lot of them don't really have a valid opinion because they don't have a point of comparison with Souls, because a lot of Armored Core players are not interested in Souls. So while you get a lot of Armored Core players that know their shit about Armored Core 6 is clearly like a bridge between Souls and Armored Core. So I feel like the relevant discussion here is going to be between the people who have played both Souls and Armored Core extensively, and there's very few people in that boat. Like, I'm not saying I'm the only one, I'm definitely not, but like we're starting to get like very, very thin for a game that's like very broadly advertised. Like, there's really only a small minority of people who really know what they're talking about in that matter. So yeah, it is what it is. Let's spend those runes. Let's go upgrade our weapon.